Hi, it's time for Lit Term number 7, and this week we're going to highlight some aspects of characters. And the first one we have up here is a protagonist who's the central character in the story. Oftentimes we consider them heroes. So, for example, here I have Harry Potter and Luke Skywalker, both heroes. Typically, for symbolism reasons, you'll find them in white clothing or a lighter color than the villain. So these are the people that we're rooting for in the story, and they're the people whom the plot is focused around. Now, the protagonist often goes up against the antagonist, who's the character who opposes them. So we have He Who Must Not Be Named, Lord Voldemort here, and then Darth Vader. And I find it interesting that both of these pictures have them in similar positions. But sometimes an antagonist doesn't necessarily have to be another character. The protagonist can be his own antagonist, which is done in like psychological thrillers like Gone Girl and stuff like that. Also, it can be things like the weather, like when we watch movies like Finest Hour or Twister, things like that. The antagonist can be those things. So this is that stuff you were learning when you did conflict, and it was man versus man versus self. Whoever that other thing is on this other side of versus is your antagonist. So the anti-hero is a big trend in literature and movies right now. Basically, you may have been exposed to this over and over again and not realized it had a name. An anti-hero is the central character, and they don't really have good things about them. They lack morality. They maybe aren't courageous or the wisest person. They like to play with anti-heroes a lot in comedy, especially like Will Ferrell movies. You know, he usually plays kind of a dummy, but we enjoy watching that and empathizing with that character. So we have Dexter here, who is a serial killer, and then Walter White, who is from Breaking Bad. And both of these characters do terrible things, and yet we empathize and root for them throughout their stories. Hollywood loves to play with the anti-hero. That's why Suicide Squad was such a big deal, because here's a bunch of people who are villains in, for all purposes, and yet in this story we flip that and make them into, quote unquote heroes. So that's what we call anti-heroes. And finally, the last thing to talk about today are foils. And for some reason, foils are hard for people to get, but basically they are contrasts that are supposed to highlight some part of another character. So, for example, I have Spock and Kirk here, because Spock is the logical one and Kirk is the emotional one. And then I have Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, because Holmes is the smart one, but he doesn't have people skills, and Watson may not be as smart, but he has people skills and can read into them. They play with foils a lot. Again, in comedy, they like to do this, where you have kind of the bumbling idiot character, and then you have the more reasonably intelligent characters, and that's supposed to be more slapstick comedy. So foils are meant to help us understand motivations of characters better and understand their personalities. Have a good week!